I'd been a long-haul trucker for over a decade, but nothing could have prepared me for that fateful night. It was supposed to be a routine pickup from a warehouse in the middle of nowhere. The place was eerily quiet when I arrived, with only a few flickering lights illuminating the loading dock. As I backed my rig up to the bay, a chill ran down my spine. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The warehouse workers loaded my truck quickly, barely making eye contact. Their hushed whispers and nervous glances made me uneasy, but I chalked it up to the late hour. As I signed the paperwork, the foreman's hand trembled slightly. "Be careful out there," he muttered, his eyes darting to the cargo hold. Before I could ask what he meant, he disappeared into the shadows of the warehouse. I climbed into my cab and started the engine, eager to get on the road. The first hour of the drive was uneventful, nothing but the gentle hum of the engine and the occasional passing car. But as I hit the 100-mile mark, something changed. At first, it was just a faint noise, barely audible over the rumble of the tires on asphalt. I turned down the radio, straining my ears. There it was again, a soft thud coming from the back of the truck. My heart raced as I pulled over to the side of the deserted highway. The moon cast long shadows as I cautiously approached the back of the truck. With trembling hands, I unlocked the cargo doors, half expecting something to leap out at me. But when I swung them open, I was met with nothing but rows of neatly stacked boxes. I climbed inside, checking every corner and crevice, but found nothing out of place. Confused and slightly relieved, I closed up and got back on the road, but my relief was short-lived. Within minutes, the noises started again, louder this time. It sounded like something was thrashing around, desperately trying to break free. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, my mind racing with possibilities. Was it an animal that had snuck aboard? Or worse, a person? The sounds grew more violent as the miles ticked by. Thuds turned to crashes, and I swear I could hear muffled screams. Sweat dripped down my back as I debated what to do. I couldn't call the police. What would I even say? I was hours from the nearest town, alone on this dark stretch of highway. All I could do was keep driving and pray that whatever was back there wouldn't break through before I reached my destination. As dawn broke, I finally saw the city limits sign. The noises had become a constant, terrifying cacophony, and I was sure the cargo hold was in shambles. I pulled into the delivery yard, my hands shaking so badly I could barely put the truck in park. The yard manager approached, his friendly greeting dying on his lips as he saw my pale, sweat-drenched face. "You okay, buddy?" he asked, concern etching his features. I couldn't find the words to explain, so I simply gestured to the back of the truck. As we walked around, the sound suddenly stopped. The silence was almost more unnerving than the noise had been. The manager looked at me quizzically as he unlocked the doors. The sight that greeted us defied explanation. Boxes were strewn everywhere, many crushed as if something had been thrashing wildly. But it was the smell that hit us first, a sickly sweet odor of decay that made my stomach lurch. And there, in the middle of the destruction, lay a figure. At first glance, it looked like a man curled up in a fetal position. But as we cautiously approached, my blood ran cold. The skin was gray and mottled, the limbs bent at impossible angles. This wasn't someone who had recently died. This body had been decomposing for years. The police arrived within minutes, cordoning off the area and peppering me with questions. I told them everything. The weird vibe at the warehouse, the noises during the drive, the destruction we found. They listened with increasingly skeptical expressions, exchanging glances that clearly said they thought I was losing my mind. As crime scene techs swarmed the truck, one of the detectives pulled me aside. "Look," he said, his voice low, "I know this is bizarre, but we need you to level with us. Did you know this body was in here?" I vehemently denied any knowledge, my mind reeling at the implication. How could I have been transporting a years-old corpse? And how in the world had it been moving and making noise? The coroner arrived, and I watched in horrified fascination as they carefully removed the body. It was then that I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Clutched in the corpse's rigid hand was a scrap of paper. As they pried it loose, I caught a glimpse of faded handwriting, a date from 5 years ago, and a hastily scrawled message. "If you're reading this, I'm already dead, but I won't rest until I'm home." The investigation dragged on for weeks. The body was identified as a man who had gone missing 5 years earlier from the very town where I'd picked up my load. The warehouse was searched, but the workers I'd encountered that night were nowhere to be found. It was as if they'd vanished into thin air, leaving behind more questions than answers. I was eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, but the experience left me shaken to my core. I couldn't shake the image of that decomposed body, couldn't forget the sounds of its impossible movement. Experts tried to explain it away. Gas buildup in the corpse, the motion of the truck causing the body to shift, but I knew what I'd heard. That thing had been alive, in some twisted way. I quit trucking after that. Couldn't bear the thought of getting behind the wheel, always wondering what might be lurking in my cargo. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, the phantom sounds of thudding and screaming echoing in my ears. And I can't help but wonder, was I simply delivering a body to its final resting place? Or had I been an unwitting accomplice in something much darker, something that defied the very laws of nature? One thing's for certain, I'll never look at a long, dark highway the same way again. Because now I know that sometimes the real horror isn't what's lurking in the shadows ahead. Sometimes it's what's traveling right behind you, just waiting for its chance to break free. I've been a long-haul trucker for over a decade, but nothing could have prepared me for that night on the lost highway. It was supposed to be a simple run, just another day on the job. I'd heard about this shortcut from some of the old-timers at the truck stop, a rarely used highway that could shave hours off my trip. Who was I to pass up on that kind of opportunity? As I turned onto the unmarked road, a chill ran down my spine. The pavement was cracked and overgrown, like it hadn't seen traffic in years. But I shrugged it off. What did I care about road maintenance as long as it got me where I needed to go? The first few hours were uneventful. The monotonous landscape rolled by, endless fields, the occasional decrepit barn, and not a soul in sight. It wasn't until the sun started to set that I realized something was very wrong. My GPS began to glitch, the screen flickering with impossible coordinates. I tried to radio for help, but all I got was static. That's when I noticed it. A gnarled old tree, twisted like a witch's fingers reaching for the sky. I could have sworn I'd passed it an hour ago. My heart began to race as I pressed down on the accelerator, eager to reach the end of this godforsaken road. But the end never came. As night fell, an oppressive darkness settled over the highway. My headlights barely penetrated the gloom, and shapes seemed to dance just beyond their reach. I kept driving, my knuckles white on the steering wheel as I passed that same twisted tree for the third time. Panic began to set in. I was trapped in some kind of loop, driving the same stretch of road over and over again. But how was that possible? I'm a rational man, I told myself. There had to be a logical explanation. That's when I saw her, a figure standing on the side of the road, arm outstretched in the universal hitchhiker's gesture. Relief flooded through me. Finally, another person. Maybe they could help me make sense of this nightmare. I slowed the rig, pulling over to the shoulder. As I opened the door, the cool night air hit me like a slap to the face. "Hey there," I called out. "You lost too?" But as I approached the figure, my blood ran cold. It wasn't a person at all, but a mannequin, its plastic arm frozen in that beckoning gesture. Its face was blank, featureless, yet somehow I felt it watching me. I stumbled backward, scrambling to get back to the safety of my truck. As I slammed the door shut, I could have sworn I saw the mannequin's head slowly turn to follow me. With shaking hands, I started the engine and peeled away from the shoulder. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. It had to be a hallucination, right? Maybe I was more tired than I thought. But as I continued down the endless highway, more impossible things began to appear. Road signs that changed their destinations every time I blinked. A hitchhiker that vanished when I looked in my rearview mirror. And always, that twisted tree marking another completed loop. I don't know how long I drove. Hours, days maybe. Time seemed to have lost all meaning on this cursed road. My fuel gauge never dropped below half, even though I should have run out of gas long ago. I didn't feel hungry or thirsty, just an overwhelming sense of dread that grew with each passing mile. I tried everything I could think of to break free. I turned around, hoping to backtrack, but somehow always ended up going the same direction. I drove off-road, only to find myself back on the highway moments later. It was like the road itself was alive, determined to keep me trapped in its grip. As my desperation grew, so did the horrors around me. Shadow creatures darted across the road, always just out of clear sight. The sky above turned a sickly green, filled with stars in impossible configurations. And still, I drove on, a prisoner of the lost highway. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw the lights in my rearview mirror. At first, I was elated. Another vehicle. Maybe they could help me escape this nightmare. But as the lights grew closer, dread pooled in my stomach. They were moving too fast, bearing down on me with impossible speed. I floored the accelerator, pushing my rig to its limits. But the lights kept coming, growing larger, brighter. I could make out the outline now, a monstrous truck, 10 times the size of mine, its grille a mass of gnashing teeth. Panic overwhelmed me. I swerved, trying to evade the behemoth behind me. That's when I saw it, an exit ramp I hadn't noticed before. Without thinking, I wrenched the wheel, sending my truck careening onto the off-ramp. For a moment, hope surged through me. Had I finally found a way out? But as I hurtled down the ramp, my heart sank. It wasn't leading to another road or a town. Instead, the ramp curved up into the starry sky, defying all laws of physics. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable crash as my truck left the ramp and soared into the air. But the impact never came. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the highway, passing that damn twisted tree once more. I don't know how long I've been trapped here on this lost highway. Days, weeks, maybe even years have passed in this endless loop. The horrors have become almost routine. The mannequins, the shadow creatures, the impossibly huge truck always on my tail. I've tried everything to escape. I've driven until I passed out from exhaustion, only to wake up behind the wheel, still driving. I've attempted to end it all, but death itself seems to have abandoned this place. Nothing changes, nothing ends. Sometimes I see other lost souls on this highway. Other truckers, families in minivans, solitary drivers with terror in their eyes. We pass each other like ships in the night, unable to stop, unable to help. Are they real or just another illusion of this cursed road? I no longer know, nor do I care. So I keep driving, trapped in this purgatory of endless asphalt and diesel fumes. If you're hearing this, consider it a warning. Be careful of the shortcuts you take, the unmarked roads you travel, because somewhere out there, the lost highway is waiting. And once it gets you, it never lets go. The next time you're driving at night and see a truck pass by, take a good look at the driver. It might just be me, forever trapped on the lost highway, praying for an end that will never come. It was just another long haul, another nameless town on my route. The evening sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road as I maneuvered my semi through the winding streets. That's when it happened. She came out of nowhere, a hunched figure shuffling into the road. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The sickening thud still echoes in my nightmares. I jumped out of the cab, heart pounding. There she lay, an old woman in tattered clothes, her eyes staring blankly at the darkening sky. A crowd gathered quickly, their whispers carried on the wind. "It's her," I heard someone say. "The witch." I tried to explain, to apologize, but they just stared at me with a mixture of fear and accusation. The local sheriff arrived, took my statement, and let me go with a warning. "Accidents happen," he said, but his eyes told a different story. As I climbed back into my truck, I noticed an old woman watching me from the shadows. Her eyes gleamed with malice, and she raised a gnarled finger, pointing at me. A chill ran down my spine as I drove away, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled over me. Little did I know, my nightmare was just beginning. That night, as I pulled into a rest stop, strange things started happening. My truck, usually reliable, began to sputter and groan. The radio crackled with static, occasionally spitting out words in a language I didn't understand. And in the rearview mirror, I swore I saw a figure sitting in the back of the cab, watching me. I tried to convince myself it was just guilt playing tricks on my mind. But as the night wore on, the incidents became harder to ignore. The temperature in the cab plummeted, my breath visible in the air despite the warm summer night outside. The windshield began to frost over, intricate patterns spreading across the glass like skeletal fingers. Then I saw her. The old woman I had hit, standing in the middle of the road ahead. I blinked, and she was gone, only to reappear closer, her face pressed against my driver's side window. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth opening in a silent scream. I swerved, nearly jackknifing the trailer. Panic set in. I needed to get back to that town, to find out what was happening. As I turned the truck around, the engine sputtered and died. I tried the ignition again and again, but nothing. Then in the silence, I heard it, a low, rhythmic chanting coming from somewhere inside the cab. The words were foreign, but their meaning was clear, a curse, the witch's curse. Suddenly, the truck roared to life on its own, the steering wheel turning by itself. I was trapped, a passenger in my own vehicle as it barreled back towards the town. The locals were waiting for me when I arrived, their faces grim in the early morning light. An old man stepped forward, his eyes filled with sympathy. "You've been marked," he said. "The witch's curse is upon you, but there might be a way to lift it if you're willing to pay the price." The old man, who introduced himself as Ezra, led me to a dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. The air inside was thick with the scent of herbs and something darker, more sinister. "The witch you hit," Ezra explained, "she was our protector once. But power corrupted her, turned her against us. We've been trying to break her hold on the town for years." He handed me a small, leather-bound book. "This contains the ritual to lift the curse," he said. "But be warned, it comes at a cost. The curse must be transferred to someone else." I felt sick. Could I really condemn another person to this nightmare? As I pondered my dilemma, the house began to shake. Outside, a storm had materialized out of nowhere, lightning illuminating the witch's face in every window. Her laughter echoed through the howling wind. "Decide quickly," Ezra shouted over the noise. "The longer you wait, the stronger she becomes." I opened the book with trembling hands, the Latin words swimming before my eyes. As I began to read, the storm intensified. Objects flew around the room, and I heard the witch's voice in my head, promising unspeakable torments if I continued. But I pressed on, my voice growing stronger with each word. The air crackled with energy, and I felt something inside me begin to change. The curse was lifting. I could feel it. But as relief washed over me, I saw Ezra's face contort in agony. I realized too late. He had offered himself as the new vessel for the curse. Ezra's body twisted and convulsed as the curse took hold. His eyes turned milky white, and when he spoke, it was with the witch's voice. "Fool," she cackled through him. "You've only made me stronger." With inhuman strength, Ezra's possessed body flung me across the room. I scrambled to my feet, desperately searching for a way out. The house had become a nightmare funhouse, doors leading to impossible places, stairs twisting into non-Euclidean geometries. The witch's laughter echoed from every direction. I finally burst out of the front door, only to find myself in a twisted version of the town. The sky was blood red, the buildings warped and pulsing like living things. Townspeople wandered the streets, their faces blank, puppets to the witch's will. My truck sat in the middle of the road, engine running. As I raced towards it, the ground beneath my feet began to soften and shift. Hands reached up from the earth, grasping at my ankles. I kicked and struggled, finally breaking free and diving into the cab. As I sped out of town, I saw Ezra in my rearview mirror. He stood in the center of the road, arms raised to the crimson sky. The town folded in on itself behind him, collapsing into a singularity of darkness. I drove for hours, my mind reeling from what I'd witnessed. Had I doomed an entire town to save myself? The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the relief of escaping the curse. As dawn broke, I convinced myself it had all been a terrible nightmare. Weeks passed, and I tried to put the incident behind me. I took a new route, avoiding that part of the country entirely. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear whispers on the wind, see faces in the shadows at the edge of my headlights. Then came the day I saw the news report. A small town had vanished overnight, leaving nothing but a giant sinkhole. The name of the town made my blood run cold. It was the same place where I'd had my nightmarish encounter. Investigators were baffled. No trace of the townspeople was ever found. But I knew the truth, the horrible reality of what had happened. My actions had unleashed something far worse than a simple curse. Now, as I drive the lonely highways, I'm always looking over my shoulder. Every old woman I see sends a shiver down my spine. Every small town I pass through could be hiding unspeakable secrets. The guilt of what I've done, the lives I've ruined, weighs on me constantly. And sometimes in the dead of night, when the road seems to stretch on forever, I swear I can see Ezra in my rearview mirror. His eyes glow with an unearthly light, and his mouth moves in silent incantation. I know it's only a matter of time before the witch's curse finds me again, and this time I fear there will be no escape. So if you're ever driving through a small town and see an old woman by the side of the road, whatever you do, don't stop. Keep driving and pray that the witch's curse doesn't fall upon you.